So I wanted to talk to you about trying to minimize the cost at your property by utilizing best practices of internal controls. Internal controls are ways to have checks and balances to be sure that we minimize the cost of what things are for us, and we monitor and check on that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the industry. And one of the big issues is the fact that we use volunteer board members with varying degrees of backgrounds. Some people are very, very astute business people. Other people have aspects that are helpful to the board, maybe in decorating or other items which don't go well with internal controls. And then there's a reliance we find on the existing controls or the controls that the managing agent has. You see, most boards feel once they hire the managing agent, those controls should be sufficient to protect them and that they don't have to go any further than that. But we'd like you to consider adding specific building controls, and we'll talk about that a little later. We also have a concern about the board members always working for the building's benefit. People have personal situations, and there's not always that. So that's something that's going on with the volunteer boards that I want you to think about. There's the importance of using an experienced team of professionals, that therefore all your professionals know the industry and are used to working with each other and have demonstrated their ability to protect co-ops and condominiums. I always say to my new treasurers that when we go through internal controls and getting you to understand how we work as an accounting firm and what you should look for, that you're just going to get a crash course in this niche industry. It's a very unique industry. Almost so, I wish that continuing education was a requirement for board members like it is down in Florida. So when the building does end up utilizing the managing agents or the existing controls, we generally find that they do offer adequate protection. There's some shortcomings that we find across the board, so let me highlight them for you now. Some of those are of the approval of adjustments, basically journal entries, that the amounts can be adjusted and there's not a system to be sure that approval came to the board before an adjustment or a journal entry was recorded. Also, we find that competitive bidding practices can vary. Some buildings have very, very astute competitive bidding requirements. Others only do it on certain projects. Some buildings just rely on the managing agent who says that they got 3 different prices and this is the best one. So to achieve what would be considered in the industry to be best practices would require an improvement. And what can happen is the controls can change when there's a change in the managing agent representative. If you change managing agents, you tend to get the controls of the new agent, and the ones that you may have been used to or relied upon may have fallen if they're not in the structure of the new managing agent. While we're going to talk about this issue of minimizing costs through internal controls, let's look at some other areas and industries that have looked at this and the issues that they found. So we want you to realize that your position here as a board member, alongside your people in your community living with you, that you really are under scrutiny of what would be found for a publicly traded company or for a not-for-profit. People expect more from you because you're a board member in your own property. Now, there was some issues that happened in New York State school districts, and they responded with the fact of requiring written policies and procedures, an entire internal auditing function, and testing similar to what public companies did in Sarbanes-Oxley. We are not asking you to consider going to those extremes, but we'd like you to realize that the industry of not-for-profit and also generally with volunteer boards, that similarity is here, and we really generally need to be sure that adequate internal controls grow. We've been seeing that our advisory practice for the area of policies and procedures in management consulting has had an increase in the volume of work we've been doing. We had a client that had very, very good written internal control structure, and we've actually publicized that on our website because it was that good of a system. But we generally don't find that there's best practice guidelines out there in the industry. So the series that is in front of you on minimizing cost through internal controls is going to take you through best practices. This video is just an introduction into what's to come. So we're just going to build on the foundation of building specific monitoring controls for each property. So we want to try to make sure that there are certain individuals on the board who are interested in this area and will work together to create a structure of enhanced controls beyond generally what's found in the property manager's set of controls. Also, when there's a change in the board of the property manager, controls can be dropped if they're not in the form of being memorialized in written policies, procedures, if written schedules and checklists are not used for the building employees to make sure everything that needs to be done. These can be hard to implement in a lot of properties because people are so used to doing things the way they've done before. Now, what I'm talking about here is a way to bring your costs down and to protect yourself and your shareholders. And it is beyond what's required by auditing that your auditor is going to do. An auditor only needs to understand the controls, doesn't need to be sure that they're best practices. So I'd like to invite you to go through the entire series on our best practices to minimize costs through internal controls if you're interested in finding out what could be done to enhance the protection that you're getting from the controls in your property.